May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Puba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free of economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the confines of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. Today we have a guest, one Mark Lewis, who came to Tassajara when he was a teenager as a student, and studied with Suzuki Roshi, studied with Katagiri Roshi, and studied with Gene Ross, who was one of Suzuki's earliest students who had a Zendo in Carmel. And Mark went to Carmel High, which, I don't know, it's you can get to Tassajara from Carmel in an hour and a half, easy. You know, if you're in a big hurry, you can do better than that. So, look, you're going to learn all you need to learn about Mark when we're talking. So, listen, I'm making 3 podcasts right now because Katrinka and I are going to Bhutan. I know we were just in Floating Leaf a few weeks ago, but we're going to Bhutan for 2 nights because she's going to be busy till the end of the year. And she said, we got to do it now. And I hope there to interview Tanya. She was, I did a podcast with her in the Life in Bali series, a really long one. We are planning for me to have a chat and record with my iPhone her father, who is 90 years old now, and we'll have I've already talked to him. I mean, he got some very interesting things to say. He's Dutch Indonesian, born here from Dutch ancestry, and her mother's German, and she's international. Anyway, so we're going down there, and then tomorrow morning, my best computer goes into the shop. So I'm trying to get as much work done as I can before it goes out tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to get a new touchpad, I hope. They've ordered it. God, I miss having a touchpad. I had a touchpad go bad in my last days. I love it, the Asus, but, things go bad. Katrinka's always telling me to get a Mac, but, God, it's like, I know how to run Macs. I just don't want to. It's a matter of, all the software stuff and everything. I mean, I'm so used to this. It was bad enough having to go from DOS to Windows. I loved DOS. I was faster with DOS. I guess there's more I can do now. Things are much more sophisticated. But I was so fast with DOS. I had 100 macros and 100 batch files. And, man, I just hit a couple of keystrokes and all sorts of stuff with them. And I just never got back to that type of working. I don't do any of that stuff anymore. Anyway, all right, enough of that. See, that's anything else that comes to mind. So look, after pause to meditate, we'll give Mark a call. All right, in the Bronx. So when you hear the bell, hit pause if you wish and meditate or whatever for as long as you wish. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause. And we'll be there waiting for you. And we'll hit the bell to end the meditation or whatever. And we'll give Mark a call.
Hey, David,
Hi, Mark. How's it going?
are you going to put your camera on too?
No,
No.
no. It's an it's a podcast. It's
Well, I knew they weren't going to see you, and you weren't going to see, or at least I'd be able to see you. I thought that would be fun. That's all.
you know, there's a good chance it'll hang up at some point. It uses less bandwidth to just do audio. It's more dependable.
Sure, I'm okay. I'm okay.
And listen, I always keep a picture of you on my desk, and I'm staring at it right now.
Oh, too good, too good.
Mm. All right. So what are you doing right now, Mark?
Well, I'm working. I worked in a law firm for many years. I was a legal secretary for a long time. Now I'm in something called guest services, but we don't have any guests to take care of. Usually there's, so I'm kind of just staying at home and getting paid for it.
That's a good job.
That's a very good job.
Uh, and you know how to spend your time, huh?
I do. I've been exercising more than I probably ever have in my life.
Hmm.
Um, and I get to meditate every day and go for a long walk. And I've always got a novel I'm reading, a spiritual book, a political book.
Look out for the latter. Rot your brain. Uh,
The,
uh,
the political book.
yeah, right. Uh, hey, so you live where? Do you live in New York City? Where do you probably not? Where do you live?
I'm in the Bronx near Riverdale,
Oh,
if you know that part of New York.
well, Diane Goldschlag, my first wife, Dia,
Uh-huh.
is from the Pelham Parkway area. She,
Oh, okay. That's across the Bronx from me, but oh, that's great. That's great.
yeah, we could walk
And
to the
where is she now? Where is she now?
Spokane, Spokane.
Okay.
Yeah, you could. We could walk to the park from there. A big, what was it? A botanical garden? I don't know. And to the zoo. That was neat.
Oh yeah, no, that's the zoo was it's a short bus ride for me to the zoo, and even when my kids were small, that was a great place to just go
Yeah,
often.
I normally don't like zoos, but I don't know. I enjoyed that one. Um,
Mm.
you get out, walk around, and are there parks there and stuff like
Yeah,
that?
there's a beautiful, like the third biggest park in New York is called what are you called? Um, oh, I'll think of it in a second. Van Cortlandt Park,
Hmm.
and it has a lovely wooded area behind it that not very many people go in, and so it's got lots of little trails, and you're in the woods all day. And I've got a couple of favorite places I like to go there and sit like a hippie outdoors, and meditate there. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, we don't think of that when we think of New York City, or especially the Bronx.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful park, and I can stay lost in there and not see very many people for a couple hours, then head home and
Wow.
pretend I'm working.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Um, Japan was that way too. You could because people in Japan like to congregate together, like to be together. So almost anywhere you could find some, you know, mountain or hilly area to go up and walk in and be in the woods or something, and there wouldn't be anybody else there. It
Oh,
was
that's wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah, I become a committed. I talk to the trees. I hug the trees.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that. I understand that. Um,
That's that hippie is still in me.
yeah, that's good. That's good. I talk.
But it's very funny. I always look around furtively before I hug a tree, like, good God, I don't want anybody to see me with my arms around the tree.
Right, right.
See that old man with his arms around the tree? That's lonely.
uh, Now, are you still doing hospice work?
I am still doing hospice work. In fact, I've even been doing it on the telephone.
Hmm.
Since you can't visit people during COVID,
Hmm.
the organization I work for has quite a few patients that you speak with on the telephone.
Huh. Well, so even though, I mean, couldn't you be tested negative and they be tested negative and you see them?
Well, I think most places you're not even allowed inside a hospital because a lot of hospice work is really done in old people's homes, and
Right,
convalescent
right.
hospitals. They're not letting people in there now.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, the nursing homes in America had the highest
Sixty
percentage
percent of the deaths,
of
60% of deaths in 60% of deaths in America are in nursing homes.
yeah. Wow, that is really high. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I when I get near old people, I push them away.
And then you turn around and somebody's pushing you away. Um,
Exactly.
uh, uh, wow. Well, you were telling me something that you had used in hospice work because to help people with their fear of death.
Oh, yes, a wonderful book called Journey of Souls. Um, and it's the author Michael Newton was a past life regressionist, and he just happened to. It's kind of the story of past life regression too. A hypnotist kind of stumbling upon it. But he was already a past life regressionist. Then one day he had someone hypnotized, and it didn't appear to him that they were in a past life, but they were someplace else than other than here. And he just happened to ask them, and the guy said, "Well, I'm between lives." So it's this wonderful, over the course of 3 books, he's pretty much every person he's asking, he's able to hypnotize and get them to go to this between life area. He's asking them over and over again, well, what is it like here? What is it like here? So he's almost like a cartographer visiting a place, like an explorer trying to map a place for the first time. And it sounds very similar to when people describe coming back from a near-death experience,
Mm,
where they're greeted by a family member often, or they're greeted by some sort of spirit, maybe taken to a second or third place before, in the case of near-death experiences, before they're sent back. But in this case, they go on. Um, so one of the people I read this to had done more than 40 years in prison for a series of murders, and so he was a little anxious about death.
pardon
And I was reading this book, and it's something that Michael Newton, as he's hypnotized people, is asking them repeatedly. Well, are they angry with you? What if you've done something really bad? And you know, what is so striking in all of the stories, he'll ask the questions that would be on our mind if you had someone who you felt was in it, but well, what about this? What about this? How do they treat? And they always, why would you ask a question like, there's no punishment here. Nobody's angry with you. Um,
You
so
know,
I think,
pardon me for interrupting.
sure.
However, I have opinions on this. And I have contacted those who have gone beyond, um, or certainly seem like it. And I've experienced something like that, but more like, you know, trying to get them to comment on something in the in this part or at this level. It's sort of like, well,
Uh-huh.
there's really no judgment here. Um, I've heard that, and but another thing is that looking at karma as self-balancing, not coming from the outside. Not an outside
Uh-huh.
power. But
Uh-huh.
go on.
No, no, like I said, this book provokes all those thoughts. Um, but I think that ultimately made this man happy. That sense that, you know, as various people would say, the worst they could imagine, it's perhaps you'd need to spend some time by yourself, if you've done some particularly bad things, but you're not punished for it. It's all about your education and your growth in a sense. So I think that relieved him a great deal, and also the fact that so many of the reports in general were pretty kind.
Mm. We're what? We're
Um,
what?
were pretty kind, that it just didn't sound. It never sounds like a frightening experience.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
You know, my very first hospice patient, almost 20 years ago, I was reading, as probably everybody does, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying,
mm-hmm.
and they couldn't believe that I got this little old man to like, because he was open to anything. He said, "Well, do you want to try meditating?" And then, and he, okay, you know. And so the social workers are, Murray was meditating with you,
Wow.
I had this little longtime communist from the Lower East Side, little Jewish man, suddenly joining me in meditation. Then he enjoyed doing in the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. There are certain prayers that are recommended shortly before you die. And I said, hey, do you want to do some of the? Oh yes, let's do them. So it was very open. It was very beautiful.
That's great. That's really good you're doing that. I've focused on a few people, but like I visited with Claude Dallenberg like once a week for years, and when he was in convalescent home, and I read him that book 2 times, except the second time I skipped the chapter on the hell realms. And
That's what
again,
I remember you.
yeah, the
I
hell
remember you.
realms are not. I don't need to tell you this, but uh, they're not like outside places that one goes. They're things that one creates through one's own greed, hate, and delusion, and which are impermanent states one passes through. Suzuki Roshi said they're training. I've also heard their purification. But
Mm.
another thing where you were saying in near-death experiences where one is sent back. Now, my experience now I have not had a near-death experience, but those I've read about or talked to people about, it's more like they decided to come back.
Oh well, I'm sure. Like I say, I most always what impressed me are the stories where the guide has said, "But you need to return." You know,
Uh huh.
and different people are so happy where they are. They're like, like a woman who has 3 kids and a husband. Like, do I? You know.
Oh, my grandmother Chadwick, when she was dying, and she was sort of, I mean, she was a devout Christian Scientist, and she was 95, and she would not go to a doctor, right?
Yeah.
And so mother let her, and she had a big old house, and mother had an office upstairs. My father had an office upstairs there, and then mother, when he died, mother used it, and mother would visit her, and I don't, was there a nurse or somebody? I mean, God, she was so
Wow.
old. I don't know. And I think it was mainly her and mother, but I don't know because I was living out here then. And but mother said, toward the end, she said, "Oh, Adele, it's so wonderful there. Uncle so and so is there," and she was naming,
Mm.
and she was sort of, floating in this in between state, and she
Yeah,
just,
they say that liminal state where they're kind of back and forth into the spirit world and then back into our world.
hmm, yeah, I haven't heard a lot of that, but that's what
Well,
mother was reporting.
well, I remember I was visiting a woman in her home on a weekly basis, and she was blind. And each week I arrived at because she had a nurse who visited her, a social worker, a caseworker who would come and visit her. And so I said, did you have visits this week? And she said, yes, I had a new visitor. And I said, social worker or nurse? He went, no. And she kind of pointed in the direction of the corner and said, no, it's a man all in white who just likes to sit over there. And I said, well, is he friendly? He said, oh, he has a lovely, lovely smile.
Ah, that's nice. My mother would say there were people or something up in the corner of the room. I didn't read anything into it, but she was like in an altered state. And she had an inspiring passing. If you go to
How so?
Cube.com and just write Adele, Ahdel, in the site search thing, you can go, and I recorded like the last 2 months of her life almost every day. I just stayed with her.
Mm.
So it was really inspiring.
Adele, Adele.
Ahdel.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Once she, there was just a point at which she got sick, and she never got sick. She was 98 and a half. She never got
wow.
sick. And she got some kidney infection or something. And from that point, there was a little in between area for like a week where she was sort of normal, and then she'd be sort of out of it. And then she was like somebody on an acid trip. Our personal relationship was gone, the normal one, and it was just like um, uh, it was like I was just there to be a guide, and I did nothing. I did nothing.
Yeah.
I did nothing
Yeah.
to comfort her or anything. I was just there, and but she had good humor. She was funny, and she didn't complain, and she just stopped eating. Didn't eat for 2 months or 7 weeks or something, and at
Yeah.
the end she
Yeah.
stopped drinking, and she just sort of disappeared and never complained. She didn't drink for like eight
Wow.
or 9 days at the end. Wait,
Wow.
Claude Dallenberg did that at the end, and he died on the fifth day. And I think that's more normal when people stop eating and drinking. Incidentally, I have a section on Cute.com for stopping eating and drinking as the natural, traditional method of death with dignity. And that section is called Santhara, Santhara. And that's the Jain ceremony for this.
Santhora. Yeah, I've never heard of it before.
No, I
I mean,
hadn't either.
although it's very well understood, I think in the hospice world and end of life world that often people, that there's nothing bad going on. my father stopped eating towards the end, and I remember my brother being so alarmed and wanting to have him force fed.
Right.
Thankfully, my father had signed, off on how he wanted to die, and that wasn't one of the ways. So the doctors wouldn't consent to feed him. But but I was able to convince my brother that nothing bad is taking place. It's not like a little baby being starved or something. Everything's breaking down. He doesn't need to eat. He doesn't need water. He'll be fine.
Yeah, I had to meet with the management and head nurse and stuff of the convalescent home where she was, which was a beautiful place. That was a walking distance from her home through a nice woods. And a hospice person came to join me and explain, but they weren't, this was an unusual event in the nursing home, you know.
I'm sure.
Convalescent home, it was a nice place. Um, and, also, one thing I did get mother to do, one thing we had to talk about was she didn't want painkiller. And they just wanted to give her morphine for no reason.
Yeah.
They just, as a matter of course, they're giving all these people morphine. And,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah. I know.
and, you know, so we talked about that. So brought a doctor in, and he said something like, Adele, would you like us to give you some morphine sometime? And she went, no morphine. She repeated that a few times. Yeah.
I think you and I would probably be asking for it,
Yeah, right. Screaming.
and even prematurely.
Right.
When we first go to the convalescent hospital, when do they break out the morphine?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I feel pretty crappy.
Right. I don't like morphine. Um,
Well, good for you.
yeah. Well, you know what I've found is I didn't like it recreationally, but once when I had a foot operation and they gave me some afterwards, and I was lying in the hospital bed, um, it was nice. And it was very dreamy. So, but I found if I took it for fun, I didn't like it. Anyway,
Yeah.
back to anything else to report on the hospice front?
Oh, David, I've got so many endless, wonderful stories but I was thinking about, having visitations. I remember visiting this man who I knew he had no family left, very, very frail. And, I practically had to put my face on the pillow to be able to kind of almost get nose to nose to hear him and talk to him. But he was whispering, he said, "Oh, such a beautiful woman came to visit me today. And she said, everything's going to be fine. Everything's all right." And, I couldn't resist. I asked the nurses station, "Did he have a visitor today?" "Oh, no, he never has anyone visit." And I thought that was so beautiful,
Wow.
that he was having visitations like that.
Wow. You know, um, it's hard for me to. I'm amazed when all the reports I have gotten and of beings like guiding us and helping us and being there for us, beings in other, not in our physical realm. I've
Uh-huh.
just heard, read, and experienced a certain amount of that. And a psychic I knew and dealt with for years, a really very powerful psychic, he said, well, yeah, it's always, he said to me once, I went to him, he said, wow, what happened to you? He said, did you become a Hindu? I said, why are you saying that? He said, because you've got all these, I don't know how he worded it, all these beings around you, I said, "Oh yeah, I started have started to begin my meditation by asking for help from all higher beings." He said, "Oh yeah, that'll do it." He said, "I don't really know how much they can help you though." I thought that was really interesting.
Oh, that is terrific. That's terrific, David. That's a good story to get out.
and and uh, but he said, and I had another psychic say I had one principal uh, something entity watching over
Uh-huh.
me and following me. But then I think, really, don't you have something better to do? I mean, and I really don't believe in things. I just listen to those things and go, "Oh, that's cool." But I really think it's a mistake to latch on to things and think about them a lot and believe in them real hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Although, most mediums say that we all have uh, the presence of other beings around us,
Yeah,
and often the key is, like you say, if you ask for help, they want to try to help you, but you really don't unlock the door unless you ask.
yeah.
So there you are, asking for help. Okay, we're here to help. That famous painting of Buddha dying, where there are all kinds of they're human people, but there are all kinds of beings surrounding
Oh,
him.
sure,
I always
sure.
thought that was very beautiful. There's a painting in Istanbul that I saw a few years ago of Mary dying, and again the same, where there are human figures and then there's clearly spiritual figures surrounding her.
Right. Well,
So that idea that you don't die alone is one that I find appealing.
right. You know, non, you know, non, entities that aren't part of our realm uh, that are with us in other ways are, they're almost always depicted in art as being human and or having clothes on and stuff.
Exactly, exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
it's that's what myth is. That's what all teaching and stories and art and everything is. It's expressing things that really can't be expressed directly. But
Yes,
um,
yes.
there's a temple where I've gone and done vipassana retreats up north here, Brahma Vihara Rama. Vihara's
Mm.
monastery, and uh, it's got an alcove with a nice tree that I don't think it's a Bodhi tree, but like that, and it's got a statue of Buddha there, and then it's got a big painting all around it. God, I don't even know. Is that a painting of Buddha? No, I think there's a Buddha in front of the tree. Anyway, there's a big mural all the way around it, and it's all the angelic beings around Buddha as he's meditating under the
Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
bow tree, I guess. Um, oh, there's a tree. There's a place where I go to another type of retreat that has a descendant of the bow tree in India, and actually, it's a younger. It's it's a descendant that goes back further than the one in India because it comes from the one in Sri Lanka, and I think the one in Sri Lanka predates the one in India, which but I,
Amazing,
I
amazing.
forget the details. Um, hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Well. Uh.
And,
Yeah. So you've
and
gone.
go ahead.
Yeah. No. You.
Is India someplace you visited a number of times, David?
I was there once for 3 months and once for 4 months, uh, and had the second time I was around the Ramana ashram in uh,
Sort of in the south of India, in Arakalakashanabalalam. It starts with an A. Whenever I see it, where Ramana Maharshi spent his life.
Tiruvannamalai.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And there's another place, I think it's called Aranchula or something like
Yeah,
that.
Arunachala. That's I
Yeah,
think I pronounced it right. That's the mountain there. And,
exactly. Okay.
you know, um, I, uh, uh, I had found, I was living at John Terrence in his barn for like 8 years, 9 years. I don't know how long. And he's a Zen teacher in the Haradayasthani line, you know, in
Uh-huh.
Santa Rosa, Pacific Zen Institute. Also, they're the primary fiscal sponsor of Cuke Archives. Uh,
Oh, that's terrific.
yeah. And, oh, yeah, great guy, great group. Anyway, I found the little Ramana book there by David Goddard, which had been read by a zillion people. And I read it and I loved it. And now that book I read to Ananda over and over. Well, he didn't want to hear any Suzuki Roshi stuff. You know, he liked
Yeah.
Pure Land, but basically didn't. But we read very little Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism. That he'd always liked Rajneesh because Rajneesh was sort of positive in many ways, but finally he got tired of hearing Rajneesh, but never got tired of hearing Ramana Maharshi. Uh,
Oh, it's such a loving. He had such a big impact on me.
uh,
I remember maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I was reading a book of his or sayings of his, and there was something like, if your meditation's not working, just surrender to God. He'll take care of you.
uh,
It appealed to me so much, and at that time I was reading Tibetan books that included prayers to different beings, and I just thought, yeah, I thought that idea of prayer, and I sort of began what I call a prayer journey of just learning more about prayer and how I could integrate prayer into my life. But it really starts with Ramana Maharshi.
yeah, Ramana Maharshi was asked um, if there was a God that created heaven and earth. Said, "Sure, just as real as you are." But said, when you stop believing in it, it'll stop being real. Something like that. Uh,
Yeah.
um, uh, when I decided to go to India, I just decided I wanted to go. I'm always working on the archives and different stuff, and I decided I had a little money and I wanted to get out. So I actually, Katrinka and Clay, my younger son, and I all three went. Clay went with me at first, and we were just together 10 days. We went to Pune we were guests at a cultural event there. That was nice. Anyway, and then Katrinka came for the first month. But how I decided where to go and be in Tiruvannamalai was because I'd read that book. I knew nothing about it. I did not know where it was. I didn't know if there were any people there. Well, and
Yeah.
then it turned out it was this center for gurus to come. So we got to go to a few, what do they call it when you sit with a guru? Uh,
Darshan.
Darshan. We went to a few darshans with Muji, and that was great. We really liked him. But I'd go meditate every morning at the Ramana ashram, and then David Goddard was there a lot. The
Wow.
guy had written the book,
Yeah.
and there was a priest there, Catholic priest from Kamaldali in Big Sur, and, and yeah,
Interesting.
and he was actually on a board with Tassajara and Tommy Little Bear, the Indian from the Esalen tribe, for I don't know, something to do with that area. Hmm.
Well, I used to go to the Camaldolese Hermitage even in high school just to experience having 3 days in silence.
Really?
Um, yeah, and went there a number of times. It's such a special place. Have you been there where you're so up high and all you see below you on certain days are clouds, and then you have these monks walking around in white robes. It's really like a vision of heaven. Like, this is awfully beautiful. The sunlight shining on you, and all you can see below you are clouds. You can't see the Pacific Ocean or anything.
I have been up there a few times, but I don't recall that. Daya and I went there once, and they allowed us both to stay, and thought that might have been the only time a woman ever stayed there. I mean, it was against the rules, but they said, "Oh, what the heck." So we stayed
Wow.
there.
Wow.
Um, yeah. So, hey, well,
Yes.
let's get a little into your wave-seeking mind story.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
you are in high school going to Kamali, and you first came to Tassajara when you were in high school. What led you to do these sorts of things?
Well, it's funny, David. I was always reading. I remember I was 15 and I was living in Carmel and I was at the Carmel Library and I got attracted by a book by Rudolf Steiner and
Hmm.
it had lots of Indian thought in it. It had meditation in it. But I remember telling you this when I was 18 when I met you that the real genesis of Mark doing Zazen was my high school girlfriend broke up with me and I was just a wreck. And there weren't a lot of self-help books like there are today. And I remember I read the big popular psychology book of the time was on the psychology of being by Abraham Maslow, offered no help for a broken heart. And I read that, but then I found the three pillars of Zen, and it did show you how to do Zazen.
Uh-huh.
And I found if I did like 20 or 30 minutes of Zazen, for several of those minutes, not all of them, but for several of them, I wasn't thinking about Becky. Because I remember you being surprised, like, you do this every day? And I was like, oh, yeah. Like when you're really desperate, that's the best way to learn Zazen. Like, I am in so much pain. Please help me,
Uh-huh.
And it really did. Like, I would just sit there quietly and no Becky for a few minutes because it just seemed like 24/7. You are such a loser.
I've had that
And she's having
experience.
sex. She's having sex with other guys all the time. There's nothing like a high school broken heart,
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
and that's why. But I remember you telling you that, and I was so pleased because you were so impressed. Really, broken heart,
Yeah,
So
see,
that's what got me started.
yeah. Wow.
And then I got introduced to my friend Rory, who I met my first year of Monterey Peninsula College. She knew about Gene Ross's little sitting group,
Mm-hmm.
and boy, I fell in love with Jean immediately. What a sweetheart of a woman.
Yeah.
So I would join her, and then there was you probably know who this is because I know you stayed
Let
in
me say
Monterey
who
for a while.
Gene Ross is. Uh,
Please.
Gene Ross was a student of Suzuki Roshi's who started practicing with him pretty much right after he arrived in America because she went to a class of his a class of that he was a guest at the American Academy of Asian Studies, and she ended up uh, starting a little sitting group in Carmel. Go on.
And she was the first woman to go to Eiheiji Monastery.
Well, um, you know, she's one of the only. Uh, Nona Ransom went there in the 30s, but
Oh,
Nona
okay.
didn't go there as a student. She might have participated a little bit, but Nona always was a Quaker at first. And, she was Suzuki's English teacher, and he was her houseboy. And then they continued to have a relationship after he graduated from college and went to AAG and stuff. Um, and but Jean got ordained as a nun, I guess, uh,
Uh-huh.
and by somebody, and Suzuki considered it for him. And I heard she sat. In my understanding is she sat in the zendo with the monks. I would never be surprised if I found out that wasn't true. That's very hard to believe. But anyway, yeah. So there she was in Carmel. And also, she was not at all from our counterculture from any of our countercultures.
Oh yeah, so yeah, such a square Midwestern, a little bit older. I guess she was probably in her late 40s, early 50s when I met her.
Yeah,
Maybe even a little older actually, because she was kind of she'd retired. She'd been a nurse and she'd retired from nursing.
yeah.
I sort of laugh now at age 70, thinking, how old was somebody when I met? When Diane DePrima passed away, and I saw some of her pictures, I said, oh my God, she must have been in her late 30s when I knew her, and she seemed like such a mature woman because I was 18.
Right. I know. I know.
You see her, so she's a beautiful young woman. I
Yeah.
always think of this older, mature woman.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
So Jean must have been maybe she was actually in her 60s.
yeah.
But there was also another Zen teacher that you probably met through Jean who did a little Sunday morning sitting in Monterey, a Japanese teacher who worked in Monterey but also was a Zen
You
priest.
mean
Does that ring a
Ueno?
bell? I guess so. I
Ueno
don't remember the
had
name.
a Soto Zen temple in Monterey for the Japanese Americans who lived there. More
Right.
like a regular church type thing.
Yeah, but he would offer Zazen on Sunday mornings, so I'd go out there on Sundays, and Jean would always be there.
Oh, really? I don't
Yeah.
remember that. I met him some. I would take Suzuki Roshi there for meetings and things, but he was a very nice man. And I think that I don't know if they ever really had a temple, but weren't they just using his home?
I don't know. It was to me so Japanesey that I just assumed it was a temple of some
Well,
sort.
maybe so. I, I'm just, it's all very vague to me now.
Well, one of the funny because Jean kind of snuck me into Tassajara because Tassajara at that time generally liked you to spend some time at Zen Center in the city in San Francisco
Right.
before you hustled off. But I hadn't done that. But she was able to use her pull
Yeah.
and get me sent to Tassajara. And you'll love this. And I always laugh about it because she said, "Now, Mark, stay very close to the Japanese teachers." Well, I'm 18. I stayed close. I mean, every time I'd see Kobe Chino, I would like pretty much like glue, was it glue on rice? I just would pepper him with questions. And he was so calm and so kind and really would answer he just was really the soul of politeness. But every time he saw me, I began to think he went, like, oh, here he comes. This 6'5" kid coming over. Like, I wanted to ask a question about karma.
Yeah, well,
So
he was
and also,
great. He was great for that.
oh, he's such a lovely man. Such a lovely
And of
man.
course, she
Um,
was close with him at Aheji. Uh,
oh, I see. So it's a longer. And there was another was it Yoshimura?
yeah, that's right. He was wonderful.
Yep. Smoking a cigarette with him was one of the great pleasures of early Tassajara for me.
Right, right.
Because he'd always very politely, would you like a cigarette?
Yeah, that guy, oh, he was so dignified and handsome. And I went to his temple in Hokkaido. He died young. It was sad.
I remember hearing that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, we stayed there. Uh, yeah, and he helped me a great deal with studying,
Mm.
the classical, stuff we chanted and stuff. And Kogan did too, but Yoshimura, I spent a lot of time with him on it. That was great. Uh, so, hey, but now
Yes.
you're talking about when you came as a student, and there were people who would come sometimes from other groups that would bypass the thing of, being at Page Street first. I mean, not everybody had no obligations and could just go to San Francisco and live there. They had,
Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
had lives somewhere else, and so if they were going to go to Tassajara, they had to do that. They couldn't go to the city first. But tell about the first time you came there.
Oh, you mean when I know you love this story, but I had taken acid. I was going to Carmel High School, and Tassajara was a place to just go and skinny dip, with your girlfriends, and
In the creek,
so
down creek.
no, no, in the hot baths too.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You could sneak there late at night, and
Oh, right.
so I with a friend of mine. All my friends had gone ahead. I was behind, but I had a car, and so with another friend of mine, we're driving up that crazy road, and as we get towards the top, there's this big truck that looks like it's from like a Steinbeck novel of coming, leaving the Okies and coming out to California. Like Tom Joad would be
Well,
driving or something. And
it was just our old Chevy pickup truck. Yeah.
so, but it was a big one. It was like a 1 ton or bigger.
Oh, it was the big truck.
And
It was the big truck. It was the six. Well, we had a 6 ton, and we had a pickup truck.
yeah, so I guess this must have been the other because it was big.
Well, when you
And
say the other, I
there,
don't know which one you mean. There's a
well, you
six
said you
ton,
had a
and there's
pickup.
a
This,
pickup truck.
yeah, this one was bigger than a pickup truck, I believe.
All right.
So, but we're trying to pass it, and there's a guy in there who looks crazy, like a crazy hippie, and he says, "There's a girl up ahead. Just leave her alone. It's my girlfriend." Okay. So we leave him behind because he's struggling, and we drive further, and of course there's a girl waving her arms in front of us. It's not like we're going to pass her on the Tassara Road, like, oh, we didn't see her. So she runs to my side I'm on the passenger side, and she says that she's so frightened that there's a crazy guy in the car, and he's dangerous, and she doesn't know what to do. And so we brilliantly think, well, why don't you get in the car with us? We'll drive slow, so he'll have to drive slow, and we'll arrive at Tassajara safely. Sounds great, you know. So, but all this guy is.
Meanwhile, you're coming on to acids, and was that your first acid trip?
It wasn't my first trip, so I remember the great realization of that trip as I was looking out the window. I was smoking a cigarette and thinking, monkeys don't smoke cigarettes, therefore I'm not a monkey.
Oh, God. That's a brilliant
That
acid
stayed with me, David.
revelation.
I like to tell people that, remember, you're not a monkey, son. So, so so we drive slow. You can just imagine this driver. All he's seeing is his girlfriend sitting between two boys who are driving extra slow. So he will drive slow. She was saying how crazy he was and was drunk and everything. So we're almost blocking him from going quickly.
Yeah,
And we
Bart,
pull in-
let me add one thing. This guy is Larry. He was not a crazy hippie. He was a crazy biker,
Mm.
and he was big.
Yeah. Oh,
He
I
was
definitely
big,
nothing but trouble.
and he had a big steel plate in his head.
Ugh.
And he was not a Zen student. He was a mechanic who had stumbled in there, and we had no mechanic. So, when we had the strictest rules in the world about who could be there, but this was guest season. We let him stay there and be our mechanic. Go on.
Oh, so we get down to the bottom of the road, and we're trying to get our stuff and our gear, sleeping bags and stuff. And that truck goes on in, and the gates open for him. But then the next thing, my friend is saying, "Mark, we got to run. We got to run." And you can feel the bad vibes in the air. And I suddenly listen and realize there's somebody shouting, "I'm going to kill them. I'm going to kill them."
He was shouting
And
it
I
to
can
me. I was there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was going to say, we really credit you with, because you were talking to him all the time. We could hear you even when he had stopped shouting, so we knew where to run away from.
Yeah.
So we could hear him in the underbrushes. We're just, oh, this wasn't how we were planning to spend our evening, running from this guy.
On acid.
Yeah. While all of our friends you just know are naked and swimming, but not us. So, but you saved my life. But that was my introduction to, Tassajara. but and not very much, less than a year later, or I guess a year later, there I was as a Zen student. And oh God, I always used to tease Jean, but she wouldn't let me tease her too much. But she hadn't mentioned Tangario. And when they told me that, thankfully, they only made me do it for 3 days. But when I was just like, what?
Well, why don't you explain what Tangario is?
Well, Tangario is where you join everybody for meditation at 4 a.m., but then when everybody else leaves, and goes on with their day, you stay there.
That's right.
And you stay there all day, and then you get up and leave when the last service, at 9 o'clock or
Well,
9:30.
you got to leave after meals. You got to leave once after breakfast, once after lunch, once after dinner, and then at the end of the night.
Oh yeah, it's real easy. Yeah, you get to stretch it.
Right, you get 15 minutes. You get something
Yeah,
like you get 15 minutes, and then you have to get back.
Oh, it was just brutal. And I always laugh at myself. Being 18 years old, it's like, I would try to think up things to think about, pass the time away, girls, kids, and there was a guy next to me. I won't say his name because you know who he is, but he would sit and he would look at his watch about every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, he was such a nice man, but being so much older than me, I mean, he's probably in his 30s then, not the sort of guy I would tell what to do. But it was so incredibly frustrating that I finally said, "Oh, will you please stop looking at your watch?" Because I knew time was not passing that quickly that anybody needed to look at their watch.
Uh-huh.
It's 10. Oh, it's 10:10. Hey, it's 10:20. Oh man!
What year was
And
that?
1968.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
No, it was. Sorry, David. It was 1969.
Yes, that's what I thought.
And it was the whole wonderful crowd. I mean, Alan Marlowe was there. You were there. Bob Halpern was there. Tommy Dorsey was there. Darlene and Tony were there. I was just as happy as could be. And when I look back on those times, I always think, oh, it's like I lived in heaven for several years. And when I came back, at the end of the summer, when I came back to Carmel, I had a New York accent. From talking to people like Johnny Crockett, I'm now talking like this.
There were so many people there from New York. Yeah.
Exactly.
New York, Minnesota, and Texas were the three states that had the most students come to Zen Center. It was funny, at least back then. At some point. And I remember telling that to the woman who wrote the article for Time magazine, and I think it came out as most of the students are from New York, Minnesota, and Texas, but that's not what I meant.
So to me, it was so many wonderful characters, and everybody knew about the Beatnik days, and of course I was a big Jack Kerouac fan and Allen Ginsberg fan, and there were people that knew them and hung out with them. So I just felt like I was with all of these special. To me, they were the best people in the world to be with. So I couldn't wait to get back. And I guess the next year. And Stan White, what a character.
Yeah.
Stanley and Mel Weitzman was so nice to me. I was always peppering him with questions. He had this always long suffering look on him, like he'd listen to me. That's going to be okay, Mark.
Mm.
And the other funny thing I was thinking the other day, remember, David, there was a period in time where everybody, if you asked them a question about Zen, they would become very Asian in the way they just started to imitate Japanese teachers struggling with their English.
Uh, yeah,
Well,
Ejo Takata was teaching Zen in Mexico City, and he might have been in Cuernavaca. But anyway, he was around there, and he worked with peasants and stuff. And we had people come from his group. But I heard that his students were speaking Spanish with a Japanese accent.
oh, that's it's so. Now, Ajo, do you mean Ajo Katagiri's boy?
No, no, Ejo Takata. He was a Rinzai Zen teacher from Myo Shinshi in Japan. I believe Myo. I'm not sure. Who was in
Yeah,
Mexico City, who was
yeah.
a fully grown adult when Ejo Katagiri was born.
Oh, yeah. No, it's just because you mentioned Ajo, and I didn't know what the time period was. I thought, oh, did he grow up and become a Zen priest?
No, that was way
Because
back there.
Shunryu,
He was he Takata came to the opening day of Tassajara and brought Suzuki Roshi a kyosaku, a stick that you hit students with.
hmm
Um, and but I don't think he stuck around. I hear he walked in and then walked out. I, it's something I didn't even know about back then. I learned it later. Hmm.
that there was maybe some bad blood between people or
No,
something like
no,
that.
no, no. It was very zen of him. No, no bad
Oh, I see.
anything.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay, okay.
yeah.
Um,
It's another sect. They don't really mingle, the Rinzai and Soto. I mean, they might in
yeah,
America, but they don't in Japan.
that's so funny. That's so funny.
Yeah.
And Marion Darby was there. She was someone I looked up to so
Derby,
much. And
Derby.
I think of Darby O'Gill and the Little People. I called her Marion Darby.
Yeah. A lot of
Yeah, very,
characters,
very.
a lot of heavy characters.
Oh, so great. And I just would really sit at their feet and listen to their stories. I remember Alan Marlowe. He was receiving all of these books from the Theosophical Society by Annie Besant and Madame Blavatsky, and then he stayed in his room for 4 or 5 days, and everybody's, where's Alan? He's just locked in his room,
He had a
And one day,
library that cost something like $10,000 in his room, and it was paid
oh, that's great.
for by his
CIA.
by Diane DePrima, his wife or his ex-wife by then,
Wow,
who believed in supporting his spiritual practice, and they had come out together.
wow. He had disappeared for 4 or 5 days, and I was just standing outside along the path where all the cabins were, talking with a couple of guys, and we see Alan come up, and he's rushing towards us, and he's saying this incantation and thrusting his fingers out at us, and thrusting his fingers back out at us. And he goes, "Oh God damn it!" You're like a wizard where it wasn't working. He just was sure he was going to make all of us disappear or set us on fire or something. And then he just stormed back to his cabin and slammed the door.
uh, yeah, yeah. I know that library he built was just full of, you know, what would you call it? Sort of like a non-traditional, well, maybe there was traditional Buddhist stuff too, but there were just tons of, like you said, theosophical and psychic and magic stuff,
Exactly,
and
exactly, exactly. He was very interested in all those things.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, so he was a great. Yeah, when I went back, first I went to no, first I went back to Monterey, and then I went down for that first training period with Tatsugami,
yeah, yeah. That's
and that was
1970. That was 1970 winter spring practice period.
and again another to me. I couldn't think of a better place to be in the world. The only hard part was all the sitting, but otherwise, I was just this happy boy with all these great people, and enjoying them so much.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
There's a problem. I'm working on a book called Tassara Stories. Incidentally, where I tell that story of your coming in and Larry and this and that. And I put it in a book too. I think they cut it out of the book. Uh, Zigzag Zen. He cut out all my funny stories, and but anyway, it's on cute.com, the unedited version, uh, and but one thing about it's very misleading, Tassajara stories, because the stories that are fun to tell are not the main thing we were doing, which was nothing. We were just sitting,
Yes.
you know. Uh, so it's, I mean, it's fun for me to do, and it shows something about our social life and little hints at spiritual practice. But mainly, what we were doing was boring, and there's nothing to write about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was the interaction with everyone that I found so wonderful, and even during sesshin, there was just a nice kind of affection for people and their suffering, and people are generally very kind to one another. I found,
Oh, that's
and they
nice.
and I was
That's nice. Well, that reflects on you. Different people report different things.
Yeah, well, of course, you remember you and I when you were Shuso because you got to stay up late. We'd close your curtains and you were allowed to stay up late,
Oh,
and we
baloney.
would
I
just smoke
always stayed
cigarettes.
up late. I always stayed up late.
No, but I just mean when you had your own cabin. You had your whole cabin to yourself.
Oh, well, wait.
Um,
When I was Shuso, Dia and I were living with our little baby, Diane back then, in the garden cabin, first garden cabin. But then I had the Shuso cabin for official meetings with people and stuff like that. The head monk cabin.
we would have our cigarette meeting after the final zazen every night, and it was wonderful to sit up and nothing better than sitting up and talking with you, David. And we would just sit and talk and sneak over to the kitchen and get some food.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and I
what a,
didn't
what a
smoke a
life.
great deal. I would just have an occasional cigarette. It might have been one I bummed too.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, he's speaking modestly.
Yeah, well, yeah,
You may have had two
I
cigarettes.
was strung out for years. I did that so much. I'd have heavy smoking periods, and I'd have periods where I just have one now and then, and finally I stopped. After years and years of being sort of,
Yeah.
I've been known people that were sort of strung out on small amounts of heroin. They call it chipping sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then I realized that basically I was having to always manage it and deal with wanting more, and I just
Hmm.
stopped one day and never wanted
Good
one
for
again.
you.
Uh,
Good for you. Good for you.
yes.
Something else I think about at that time, David. I was writing down some notes to remember to talk about. I got the great gig just because I was a tall guy of getting to work with Suzuki whenever he was there to work on building stone walls.
Oh,
And
yeah.
something I still think about Alan Marlowe and I. It was Alan, it was Bob Halpern, it was Philip Wilson, all the big guys just moving rocks around, and Al and I were, gossiping the whole time. We're probably talking about movies or, fashion, important things. And Suzuki Roshi came over to us and said, if you're going to talk while you're working, talk about what you're doing. If you can't work in silence, at least talk about the nature of the stones you're moving or the effort you're making. You know what I mean? And I still think of that to this day, where it doesn't matter the job I have when my mind is 1,000 miles away and I'm talking about fashion or movies, and I
Mm,
can hear Suzuki Roshi like, "Why don't you talk about the job you're doing?"
mm.
So, and that's a premise I've had several times, and something I always like to tell people about Suzuki Roshi. He liked bad boys.
That's right.
You, he liked you. He loved Bob. I mean, he loved you. He loved Bob Halpert. He loved Philip Wilson.
And Alan
Um,
Marlowe, good Lord, that was a bad boy.
there's another bad boy, and he also loved these big bad boys. I mean, they were such big guys. Um, yeah, and I remember I lived at Zen Center for a year and in the city, and I was talking to Bob Halpern. He was smoking a cigarette. We were near the kitchen, and there Suzuki Roshi walks into the kitchen, and Bob, like a schoolboy, hides the cigarette behind his back.
Yeah.
You know, and Suzuki Roshi comes over to chat to us, and I'm standing between them, and I can see Suzuki Roshi looking up the smoke that is coming up Bob's back and over his head. And it was so wonderful. And you could tell he was just enjoying, his bad boy trying to hide the cigarette from him.
Yeah, Suzuki really didn't like cigarettes. He once said to Bob, well, the three of us were in a car, and he said, I think this is incredible cucumber. He said, well, Zen's pretty hard, It's at least as hard as quitting smoking. And then Bob turned to me and said, did you hear that, David? And then he pretended to throw his cigarettes out the window. And when Kobo Chino first came, Coben was, had just met Suzuki, and they were in the kitchen with some students, maybe one or two students, because somebody told me this who was there, and maybe it was Bob. Bob pulled out a cigarette and offered one to Kobun, and Kobun started to take it, and Suzuki said, no, Kobun, Chino Sensei, whatever he called him, does not smoke. And Katagiri had the same experience. Katagiri lit up a cigarette in front of Suzuki when he first came in like 1964, and Suzuki just walked straight to a window and opened it, and Katagiri quit. And he said he had a very hard time quitting. Yeah, all the monks smoked. That was one of the important practices of Japanese monks and Japanese men was to smoke.
But with the Yoshimura, I loved having cigarettes with him.
Yeah.
He was always, and whenever you started talking to him, he'd immediately sit down somewhere and pull out from somewhere in his robes a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah, cigarettes used to be a thing. It got to be at Tassara. I don't know what it is now. It might be the same. There was a little spot behind the kitchen, not a little upstream, a little from the kitchen, a sycamore tree and a little alcove there right back. And that was the only place, well, I don't know, people could go out to Grasshopper Flats and smoke, but there would just be a few people who were smokers, and they'd congregate there and meet, during breaks and things. And I'd go down like once a day and bum a cigarette and sit with them. It was, a camaraderie among drug addicts.
Oh, it was wonderful. They used to have a tin of top tobacco in the office, in the summer office. And after meditation and study and breakfast, when you had that little break, people would rush into there to roll themselves a cigarette. And that's where, I got to know Tony and Darlene. And pretty much that's been true the rest of my life. If you want to meet the bad kids in any spiritual association, find out where the smokers are.
Yeah, well, that used to be true. It got to be where it was uncool and pretty much gone.
It's not the same now.
That tin of top tobacco, incidentally, was Stan White's. And Stan was the heaviest smoker I've ever known in my life, who died at, in his mid-90s. He smoked. Stan would smoke 3 cigarettes before morning zazen. He would wake up in the middle of the night and smoke, and that's rare for a smoker. And he always was offering tobacco to other people because, people who are into any sort of drug like to have company. And, uh, but I saw an exception to that when the road was washed out and he started running low on tobacco. All of a sudden, he hoarded it and nobody could have any. And uh, I remember somebody went up to the parking lot to go through the cars' ashtrays to see what there was.
Wow.
Yeah, there's, smoking cigarettes, are an
Yeah,
incredibly
yeah, no,
fierce
I can,
habit.
I'd be right there with them. Yeah.
Right. But somebody beating him to it, like every ashtray, how that was cleaned, you know. Uh, oh God, what a yeah.
Another Suzuki Roshi story I like to tell is one of my first interviews with him was at the Zen Center in San Francisco, and I was in his whatever room he used for receiving people. And I'm sitting, we're both sitting in lotus position talking to one another. It's somewhat informal. It's not like meeting him during a sesshin. Um, but he's asking me about myself, and there was a moment where he was talking about a person's spirituality, and Dan Welsh was his assistant that was walking around periodically. He'd come in and take something and leave again. And he clearly was talking to someone that he seemed to respect and value their spirituality and spiritual thought. And I thought, I actually physically turned around, David, assuming he must be talking to Dan Welsh. And then I turned around and realized, oh my God, he's talking to me. And I found that true of other wonderful spiritual teachers, where they make you feel much, much more than you think of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
They can sort of, they make you feel like, oh, I am a spiritual person. I don't think of myself as a spiritual person, but he's kind of telling me I am. It was really beautiful. And it was my first experience of that, of seeing something more in me than I see myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I've had that experience with other, meditation teachers, where it's part of the pleasure of talking to them. They're really addressing you in a way that no one else addresses you.
Mm. Mm.
I've had a couple of nice experiences like that.
Mm. That is quintessential Suzuki. Um, yeah. Yeah.
But I always loved just physically turning around, so certain that he can't possibly be talking to me.
Well, that's great.
Because I would talk that way to Dan. Dan is clearly a spiritual being,
Right. Right. Hey, tell about how did you had some hash there once, and that was very unusual. I mean, you see, one thing, there's over the period of years, there's a few pot and hash stories, and I'll tell them, and then people will say, I know, what people are like. You can have one hashish story over a period of 10 years, and then people say, oh yeah, everybody was smoking hash all the time. That's the way, you know. And
well, I think it was in Crooked Cucumber I read about where someone brought hash brownies and they got passed around.
well, it wasn't quite like that, but yeah, it was more like, let's see, who was that? Alan came in with Carl and Ed. They were two of the Brotherhood of Light acid, angels from Timothy Leary's group, and they hung out at Diane DePrimus, and also would have cocaine. But at Tassajara, they brought a big batch of hash cookies, something like that, and they were, Alan, of course, and I think he came as a guest that time with them, and were discreetly passing them out to people. And what happened was Ken Strauss saw some on Loring's desk or somebody's room, and ate a few, didn't know
Yeah.
what they were, and it just totally freaked out and was screaming, and yeah, it was a big event.
Well, the story when I was the town tripper for a training period, where I got to, I think, every 2 weeks drive into town, which was, and so often I got to go with my sidekick was Tom Giardo, and such a wonderful
Oh
guy.
yeah.
We'd go out to dinner, and, have a martini, and it was a lot of fun. Such a great character, and but I had picked up some hippie. And to thank me for it, he gave me this chunk of hash, and I was like, "Well, thanks." I didn't know what I was going to do with it really, but it seemed like I can't give it away. It's his way of saying thank you, and I brought it
That's
back with
right.
me,
How thoughtful of you. Yeah.
and I kept it in my little drawer. And then one day I said to a student, who I felt a very squarish fellow, who I just thought he might want to try, and I said, "Do you want to do something really bad?" And it was so great to see this look of delight on his face, like, yes. So it was the middle of winter. The Tassara River is raging. We sit down. I make a little pipe out of, tinfoil, and we smoke some. And then we were stoned enough that somehow jumping in that river seemed like a good idea. So we take off our clothes. It's like February or something.
Hey,
I jump in the
the
river.
river can get going so fast that it'd kill you to go in it.
Well, as soon as I jumped in it, I realized I'd done something really wrong.
Yeah.
My head was underwater. I was just racing down the river. I really didn't know what I was going to do. But I knew
Yeah.
immediately, whoa, big mistake, Mark. I've never been in water like that. And
Oh.
all I'm doing is trying to grab onto the roots of trees that are sticking underwater so that I can stop. And finally, I guess in a bend or something, I'm able to grasp onto something and pull myself up and breathe, and then slowly, with this water beating over me, pull myself out of the water. So I'm now in the freezing cold. I'm freezing. I've just saved my life. This guy does it the same thing. And what was interesting, I saw him again, and I'm resisting, as you know, saying his name. But
Yeah,
when
I know
I
who you're
saw him
talking
at
about.
when I saw him like 10 years ago, or whenever the big reunion was, the 50th reunion at Zen Center, he had no memory of it, and I was like, come on. I just thought it didn't fit in with his self-image and everything. That no, I never did anything like that. But
Well,
to
all
me,
right. No, wait. Yeah, it didn't fit in with what he wanted his public image to be, I would say.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, but because it always like, oh my God, the time I almost died at Tassara, that's how I think of it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, really, I really was head underwater, like, oh, how am I even going to get my head back up above water? It's moving so fast.
Yeah.
So, and another great one night, and I know you went on this too. Nils went on it. The park rangers came in the middle of the night and said, "There's a girl who's lost, and we need a bunch of men to go on either side of the river and try to find her." So
River,
we
you
all
mean
went on
Tassara Creek?
Tassara Creek.
How would rangers
So-
know there was somebody up Tassara Creek and we wouldn't know?
I don't know. I think they were coming from Arroyo Seco.
Uh-huh.
They were coming the other way towards Tassara or something like that. But they asked us to send men out and try to find them.
Huh.
And that was terrific. Do you remember that? We all went on separate paths. So and it was that kind of spirit I had in those days. Like, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of, can we walk in a scary forest by myself? That's a good idea. filled with werewolves and Dracula. But I thought it would be good for me, and here was an opportunity. I just went with my little lantern and walked down one of the trails that went down beside but it was a little above Tassara Creek. We were kind of looking everywhere. But finally she was found. This doesn't ring a bell?
I was on a lot of searches. What what
Oh,
what I find, what I am wondering about, was it really instigated by the Forest Service? Uh, that just
I,
seems hard for
that
me to believe that somebody were going up creek to see, who would have to have come from Tassara. Well, unless they came from the Tony Trail, or I mean, it's quite unlikely. I was on many
I just remember.
searches.
Oh, okay.
And actually we found everybody, which we were lucky because a lot of people die in those woods. And a lot of searches, they do not find live people. There's many, many
Oh
more
no.
people have died there than Death Valley. Hardly anybody ever has died in Death Valley. It's
Yeah.
called Death Valley because one person died when the first group went through.
Is that true?
Yeah.
I thought Death Valley famously had lots of bones at one time of,
No, if
wagon trains and
the difference, I've spent a lot of time at Death Valley. The difference between Death Valley and Tassajara, Death Valley, you can see everything, right? You,
exactly. I was thinking that this flat desert, you're going to see someone if they're
well,
lost.
not just that, you can see, that there's a vast expanse of sand which turns into salt, and it's incredibly hot. You'll have no reason on earth to go out there for very
Yeah.
long. It'll beat you back almost immediately. And then if you look at the hills around it, they're not dangerous at all. You can run up and down them and climb. You don't have to use trails there. I've done a lot of going up and down places there. I mean, you can get to some places where there's little cliffs and things, but very few deaths in the history of Death Valley. But there was a Frenchman who walked out at, what are they, Salt Flats, and went too
Uh-huh.
far, couldn't make it back, and like 50 years ago. But the mountains in Los Padres National Forest, they've got shale. Army climbing teams didn't like going there because it just comes off in your hand, and
Mm.
there's and you get lost there. You're going, you're coming to steep, impenetrable ravines, and oh God, it's just really difficult country. And been in a
Yeah.
lot of searches there, and I have gone off trail looking, but I knew where I was. I knew how to get back. Uh, yeah, Lambert and his dudes around there, the ranch outside, would, he was deputized as a deputy sheriff for going on searches. They'd tell me about finding dead bodies. They told me about losing a head and having it roll down one of these very, very steep mountainsides and having to go down and find it.
Ugh.
Yeah,
Terrible, terrible, terrible.
yeah. Hmm. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. So we found her.
Mm.
We found her. Good.
We found her, and I was glad that I'd taken a risk and walked through the woods by myself in the dark for a couple of hours. I thought was great. And another story I remember telling you at the time,
Usually,
David.
people wouldn't be by themselves. They'd be in groups of two or two going at the.
Yeah, for some, I don't know why I don't know if there weren't enough volunteers, but it seemed like we had to start out individually, and we were going to meet at
I, I have
some point
I
downriver.
have done that too, but mainly in the day. Uh,
Yeah. Um, but another story. I remember you were there when this happened. I got the job as I can't remember if there was official title for the guy who has to put the lanterns out and clean them up at night after
Well, that's the
zazen.
jikido. That's the person who takes care of the zendo for a day, for 24 hours, puts the
Exactly.
lamps out at night, and then takes them in the
Right.
morning. So he gets to bed very late and gets up very early.
So I remember getting the job, getting it explained to me. I was a little anxious about it. Again, I'm not Mr. I love the dark by myself. Um, so, I pick up all the lamps, you wash all the lamps and get them ready for the next day, and then you clean the Zendo and everything, and then you make a little pallet for yourself and go to sleep.
Yeah,
So I'm lying down and I see this white light, like a human form, but instead of being somebody, it's just white light. And I'm watching it walk past the windows of the Zendo, and I'm already like, I don't like this. And I've got my sleeping bag over my head, and into this room becomes this ghostly like figure, all in white, and it walks down the Zendo. It walks past me. It walks up to the altar, walks around a little bit, and I'm just like, oh, please go away, please go away. And then it's very peaceful, and it just walks out. I don't sleep for the rest of the night, or maybe passed out at some point. But when I'm telling you the next day, you take it all very casual. Oh yeah, that happened to so and so. That's our ghost or something like that. And that there were people who didn't even like. They wouldn't do the job. Like they would refuse to be
that's right.
Chiquito
That's right.
because of the Tasahara ghost.
Yeah, there were that
I think I
that
think
you
I think
know
I think
Ed
Jed,
Brown had an experience like that, and so Meg had some experience, but I can't get her to tell it to me now. Uh, but I'll get it to get it from her. Oh,
and
yeah,
I
there's a
think
lot
Jed's
of
wife Maria.
stories like that. Well, there's I can think of a half dozen or so right now off the top of my head. Some of them, like yours, is very strong, where you actually are seeing a sort of being of light or something, but
Yeah,
still having the sense of it walking. Uh,
exactly.
yeah, Ron Lava woke up when he was Jikido and thought it was daylight, and or no, thought somebody was putting the lamps out because it was bright, and thought he'd overslept, and he went outside, and there was a hovering light up near where the Han is and the bell that was just very bright
Wow.
and was illuminating the entire area. Uh,
Oh my
and
gosh. Oh my God.
he said he just stood there and looked at it, and he said it was quite benign. And and then it started fading and went out, and he said then he was standing in total darkness, no moon. And he
Wow.
came up and told me that the next day. He said, David, I have to tell somebody what happened last night. And so I decided to tell you. And he said, look, I'm a real matter of fact guy, right? I don't make things up and stuff. I went, yeah, yeah. And he told me that. And I said, after he told me, I said, well, what'd you do then? He said, well, I hadn't slept enough. I went back to sleep. That's good, Mark.
Oh
Thanks a
yeah.
lot. I enjoyed hearing that. Uh, and that'll
Yeah,
make
that
it
was it.
to Tassajara Stories. I've got that now
Oh
because I
good.
have a
Oh
little.
good. Oh
I
good.
have.
Yeah.
I'll have a like a section where I mention those. Uh, yeah, I always like stuff like that, and there's always the hardcore people who absolutely refuse to believe anything unusual and will go to great extremes to explain it away. I had a Stanford professor tell me once that people will go to such extremes to explain away UFO sightings that if they could prove what they're saying is true, then they'd get a Nobel Prize for breaking known laws of physics. Uh, uh, yeah, but at the same time, uh, I grew up around uh, sort of what I call the precursor to the New Age, and had read books about ghosts and spirits and this and that when I was a kid. So um, as a result, I always enjoyed hearing about it and this and that, but to me, there was nothing particular to do with it. If aliens or ghosts or anything want to visit me, then I'll deal with it. But I don't experience any of that, so it's the same to me as fiction. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it informs my cosmic view, maybe, but I don't really. My cosmic view is just really looking at what's in front of me. So I don't know. Uh,
Yeah, some of that. I mean, I don't know what. I mean, I do believe there are other beings around us, but I don't know what fully to make of that
that's
information.
right. What the heck is actually we don't understand what's happening. That's what original sin is. Really, is we're born and don't know what the heck is happening or who we are. And we're just told stories and things to believe and given pictures and the framework for it. And then we latch onto that. Uh, haha. Wow, that's great. Well, you got any other good ones?
Those are probably my best big Tassajara stories. When I tell people about my experience there.
Yeah.
Um, and and I still think about it now because especially during the pandemic where I'm kind of like just eating vegetables and some rice on so many days. And I was like, oh, it's just like, and you don't mind eating the same thing every day? And no, I didn't mind at Tassajara. We kind of had the same, we'd have the brown rice gruel most days. And I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There you are looking forward to your brown rice gruel. Oh, there was a little extra miso in it today, didn't you think?
Yeah. 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 When Katrinka goes to America, uh, then I revert to just making large batches of brown rice and oatmeal in the morning and stuff. I get very simple eating, and I also lose weight. Uh, and
Yeah, oh no, it's very helpful. Tommy Dorsey came and stayed with me once he was recovering from a surgery he'd had at the Monterey
oh
Hospital,
yeah,
and he stayed with me for maybe 2 weeks before he went back. And oh, he was just such a great cook. But his big specialty he called samadhi stew, which was really just a bunch of cut up vegetables in a pot. I had it for dinner tonight, and then he would add a little flour and water and soy sauce, and gosh darn it, it was good.
yeah, yeah. That's typical of Tommy to be recovering in your place and taking care of you at the same time.
Exactly, 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 exactly. Oh, such another wonderful reason to live and to have stayed at Tassar. What a great person.
Yeah, 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 indeed. So, well, what happened after Tassajara? What happened with Jean? Because you were still sitting with her out there.
Well, I did. When I left Tassajara, well, the reason I left, well, there are two reasons I left Tassajara. I mean, the longer philosophical one was Baker Roshi kept saying to all of us, this is not the next groovy place to live. He kept emphasizing, we're not here to have a good time. This is not a place for pleasure, and thinking back on it, I'm sure he was trying to get rid of all the people who, no, this is the grooviest place you can live. And because I know when he'd say that, I'd like, that's not true, but it would make me question what my own practice was until I felt maybe I shouldn't be there. And a woman who I'd seen the previous summer as a guest came a second time, a French woman, and she said, if you can come to France in August, you can stay with me on my parents' farm for 3 weeks. And I thought, I'm going. And so I was planning to stay till September, but I immediately, I went home, and I went to San Francisco briefly where my mother lived, and I flew off to France and lived there for 4 years.
No kidding. I didn't know that. Did you
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
relationship with that woman?
I did have a brief relationship with that woman.
Hmm. And what did you
Um,
do for 4 years?
Well, so many things. I mean, I did get to spend 3 weeks with her, and then I knew some other people who let me house sit for them while they're away in Paris for a couple of months, and then I started meeting people in Paris, and then I got an acting job in Brussels. Oh, and this was great. Tassajara helping out again. Um, I was running out of money, and I was trying to think what kind of work could I do. Well, I had gotten to cook in the Tassajara kitchens, and I'd gotten to be the baker in the Tassajara kitchen. So I went around to all the vegetarian restaurants in Paris and asked if they needed anybody. And this one guy said, "I don't need anybody, but a friend of mine in the south of France does." So there was like a little vegetarian hostel um, in the south of France, way up on a hillside overlooking the Mediterranean. I can't, and it was for Rosicrucians went there for retreats.
Wow.
Theosophists went there. So
Wait
it
a
was
minute.
this beautiful place
Rosicrucians
for
and
the
who? Who was the second?
Theosophists,
Yeah.
French spirituality, counterculture spirituality, older people
Yeah.
generally. Plus, a retirement home, a pension, they say in French. So I ended up being the cook there for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, living in a little trailer near the main quarters, and it was just idyllic. Um, I'd come in the morning, and the woman when I got my friend on the phone was telling this woman that I was like 75% fluent, and I was more like
Oh, yeah.
25%
I
fluent.
get
I
that
remember
here. I have that up here. Yeah.
she was giving me instructions, and I think at a certain point she was realizing I don't think he knows what I'm saying. So I cooked with her for a little while, but then she started letting me cook, and I was just making the kind of meals I remembered from, making soups and salads and bread. And people seemed to like it. I made pizza, all these different vegetarian dishes at the time. Oh, this is a lovely story. But anyway, so yeah, I was in France for some time. I did quite a bit of acting in France, but always kind of at the starvation level of like an off Broadway actor in New York. But a story I always tell about Katagiri Roshi, if I can tell a Katagiri Roshi story.
Yes, you have my permission.
Okay, good. Well, for a year, I got to work with him as the president of the Monterey Zen Center. And we would have like a vegetarian meal once a month where there were 12, 15 students maybe who would, it was a potluck, vegetarian, people would bring food. Um, and, vegetarian cooking wasn't pretty, this was like 1970, so it wasn't very advanced. Um, and I knew that Katagiri would eat meat if it were given to him. So my
Oh, well,
grandmother
sure
was
he would.
visiting.
It wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I knew he would, and I knew if he were eating meat, none of the other students would object. They would like, okay, I'm going to do what my teacher does.
Yeah.
So my grandmother was visiting, and her signature dish is leg of lamb. So
God.
um, we make 2 legs of lamb. I had a big garden in my backyard. We had all these great vegetables. I made all of the bread and stuff for the meal, and I cut up the lamb and potatoes and gravy, and really a traditional farm dish. My grandmother was a farmer's daughter, and I bring him this plate of food, and then I see him get up and have seconds. So my grandmother's happy, I'm happy. But then he does something I'd never seen him do before. He gets up and has thirds. And up to that time, I thought it was like a Zen thing to never have more than seconds.
God.
So, and here I was, this big guy. I never had more than seconds. I did what my teacher did. So I get up and he's having thirds, and this happened a number of times with Category where I'm questioning him about his behavior, and I said, Roshi, I've never seen you have thirds. I thought it was like a Zen thing to never have thirds, and he looked at me like I was so sad, maybe a little bit simple, and he said, not if it's really good. That was so wonderful. And of course, my grandmother just loved it, but it was just, not if it's really good, you big dope.
uh,
So yeah, that's one of my favorite memories of Katagiri.
uh, uh, yeah, Katagiri. I think he told me his family had a fish market or a fish restaurant I don't know, but he
Mm.
didn't like fish. He seemed to aversion from fish, and wanted meat if he was
Yeah.
out. I mean, there was nothing against eating meat for almost any Japanese monk or Japanese Buddha.
Yeah.
Now they're
Yeah.
in the temples, they'll be vegetarian. That's the norm. Not always though, but if it's
Yeah.
being religious, I mean, you'll have temple. You may be a family because so many of your temples in Japan are run by families, and that priest has his family there. They might be eating meat in their own, but if they have a public thing, usually not. And vegetarian fare in temples is the norm. And there are monks in Japan who are vegetarian, but there's far fewer. I mean, there's far more in America who are. It's a much bigger thing
Yeah.
in the West than in Japan. Yeah, that's neat. So thirds, well, keep going.
Well, but yeah, so I stayed in France and acted in France, and then
You acted in
you
English,
know,
huh? They had plays in English.
well, I did two plays in English. Then I did a movie in French, and that was a lot of fun. We had just enough money. We've been able to borrow just enough money to get film stock, but pretty much didn't have anything else. So the director, who was also the writer of the film, made the story work so that wherever the next scene needed to be shot was where one of the crew had a family member.
Uh-huh.
So we started in France, and we shot scenes in Switzerland, and then we went most of the crew, there were about 12 of us altogether. Most of the crew were Italians who were going to film school in France. So I just got this wonderful trip, like 2 months of just eating in people's homes in Italy, from the top of Italy, because we were coming out of Switzerland, all the way down to Sicily.
Mm.
It was just a terrific way to see a country, where you're just, that feeling when someone in a foreign country invites you into your
Oh,
home.
yeah.
You're like, oh, this is so special, so special.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was great. And then finally, I came back to. I didn't come back. I went to New York for the first time, thinking that was the center of acting. I may have been wrong. I've heard a lot of people talk about L.A.
Well, New York's more thought of as theater and LA as movies, right?
Exact movies and television.
Yeah.
So there would have probably been a little more work in Los Angeles. And anyway, so yeah, I just started acting and doing lots of off Broadway in New York, and slowly getting doing all those different things you have to do as an actor to get in the unions and all that stuff. And just and then I had children. So at a certain point, I
Hey, wait,
realized
you had
I may have
children.
to.
So, did you get married?
I did get married.
Oh, that's usually a precursor to having children. So, who did you marry?
Exactly. I married a fellow acting student, and I mean we're long divorced now, but we had two boys. And well, you met Cody and Guthrie.
Yes, I did. I met him in New York, and we had dinner, and you were so funny. I was falling down on the floor in the restaurant. You were really on that night. Good Lord, you were killing me. Yeah.
Well, I remember having so much fun. I think Crooked Cucumber just come out, and so you were visiting bookstores, the little independent bookstores in New
Yeah,
York.
I had an event
and I
at Gotham Books.
Right. But I know we were in one little bookstore, and the guy said, "Well, who's he?" Pointed at me, and I said, "I'm his only living disciple." So I felt I'd named me in perpetuity. I'm David Chadwick Roshi's only living disciple.
Yeah, yeah.
And my sons still remember because we were having so much fun and we were all hugging as we were saying goodnight. And the waiter came over and said, "Can I have a hug too?"
Oh, really? That's nice.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
nice.
yeah.
Ah, Ah, so acting. So, and then what?
Then the acting didn't at a certain point after you have kids. So I got a job, and the kind of part-time job I'd had in a law firm doing word processing became kind of my career.
Yeah.
So I did that for. I mean, I'm still there. I mean, I moved around in different administrative positions, but I've been there for like more than 25 years. Um, but they were really good to me when my sons were small. I remember I had a boss who was such a nice guy when my kids were little, and I'd say, well, I'm coaching Little League, and they're supposed to be a practice. Oh, yeah. He just always felt anything you're doing with your children is more important than work. So he would let me, I'd come late so I could read to their classes, on the days I had
Oh,
to
that's
take to
nice.
school.
That's
Uh,
nice.
yeah, yeah. So it was a nice time.
Hmm.
Um, and then about the nicest one of the really nice things was beginning that whole hospice care and learning about that and that was so transformative,
Hmm.
and met um, you know s- uh, and that sort of furthered my interest in continuing meditation. So that's had a very uplifting influence on me, and going to so many different retreats for caregivers and stuff where you just meet so many lovely people who are all there to meditate together. And I know Koshin Paley.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I know at least they're Facebook friends, and so I've been at a number of the workshops they give because they have a hospice training center here in New York. But they have caregiver retreats and stuff that are pretty wonderful.
Ah, well, that's great.
And also,
That's wonderful you do that.
and Sogyal Rinpoche he has hospice. He has a big hospice in Ireland. I think he's kind of been kicked out for
He's been kicked out
misbehavior.
of the
But
phenomenal realm. He has passed on to the next bardo.
oh, has he? Has he? Has he?
Yeah,
But
but he
still a
went out
marvelous
in
book.
disgrace.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turned out he was being very abusive. Um, uh, you know,
Mm.
yeah,
I could see it when I went to see him several times giving public speaking, just the way he interacted with, because I loved his book so much, and I thought some of the students who taught classes on hospice care I just thought were phenomenal people, but he really came across as like what an asshole. He just wasn't nice to people.
yeah, really,
You know,
it's
you you go see the Dalai Lama, you think, oh, people must love being around this
yeah.
guy.
Dalai Lama has excellent character. Probably we'd better be wrapping it up. We're going on. We're about
Okay.
2 hours now. Is there any soliloquy you'd like to end with?
I think that's all my. Oh, this was sweet. I was at a retreat to do centering prayer last year, another type of silent meditation, and it was at the Garrison Retreat House, which is about 60 miles north of New York. And because we're in silence and we're eating in silence, they booked a small group of Zen students and to use one of their smaller rooms. They have these large. It's in an old Catholic monastery that's been decommissioned. So we had the large room, and then there was a smaller room where it was a Zen group of Zen students sitting zazen, and then we'd all eat together in silence at meal times. And out front of their little room where they were all sitting was a picture of Suzuki Roshi. And every time I would pass it, I would think, "Oh, come invite me in. I'll tell you stories about Suzuki Roshi." They were all such young people. There wasn't anyone there who could possibly have ever known him. And every time I passed their door, and hear them whatever ritual they were doing, I always wanted to knock on the door and like, "Hey, you want to hear some Suzuki Roshi stories?" Yeah, yeah, yeah. So nice to talk with you, David.
Yeah, yeah. And we had a nice talk the other day. We had a nice talk today.
Oh, one other great thing, David. When I lived after Diane DePrima passed away, I was writing Jeannie to say, I always, when people ask me about living in Zen Center, and I said, of course you have to talk about Suzuki Roshi, but just a close second was getting to go up to Diane's house. Just all the magical amount of people who passed in and out. And I remember her saying, "Oh, I've got to go up to Bob Creeley's. Do you want to come, Mark?" And I'm like, "Yes." She was so generous and so kind, so nice, and so many to me, famous counterculture people coming in and out of her house. Yeah, such a special time to live in the city.
Well, there were very few of us that went over to Diane's place.
Oh, I know she wasn't inviting everybody. I mean, I felt very, very
Well, there
special.
wasn't anybody
So,
rejected. It's just that most people didn't think to do that, or didn't know her and just didn't go there. And
yeah,
there
yeah,
was a little bit of naughtiness happening there, which most people weren't interested in.
yeah. Although I remember going there after a session and, and getting to, smoke hash with so many of the participants. That was pretty funny.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
Huh. All right. Well,
Anyway, my friend, I guess I will go. It's, I guess, 10 or 11 here.
yeah, you're going on.
Oh,
Well,
it's
let's
10.
see. I can tell you what time.
It's
No,
10.
no,
It's
it's
10:02 here.
10:03 there.
Oh, no, your watch is wrong. Oh, now it's
Ha
10:03.
ha! Yeah, yeah. See, we're ahead of you. We have.
You are. You
You're
are.
just living in the past. You're living in my past.
I am. I'm such a big part of your past.
Yes, right. Uh, and come visit.
Listen. I'm going to retire within the year, and I definitely want to come there because I definitely want to go to India, and I think I should see you first so you can tell me how to go there.
Oh yeah. Well, India is an ordeal, and Bali's easy. Bali and Thailand are the
Yeah.
easy places, and India is the hard place. But I love India. I mean, good Lord. But and I went to India. I was in India. What last time? 2011, 2003, 2011. There are a couple of places I know people I'd really love to go, but it's just exhausting just thinking about it. Uh, India,
Yeah. Yeah.
India. I say India is a good place for somebody to go who thinks they're beyond anger. They are there to mind fuck you.
Really, when I get anxious thinking about it, I was in Cairo like 5 years ago, and there's extreme poverty in Cairo, and I thought this is just preparation for India.
Oh, there's worse poverty in America to me. American poverty is just hopeless. You know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not. It's just that the masses that you see. It worries me, but and hygiene and all those things.
I was terrible. I would just eat anything anywhere. I never got sick either. Uh, but I'm not advising others to do that. I would go into
Yeah.
little places where they'd take a dish and they'd put it in this dirty water, and then they'd put my food on it, and I
Uh,
just never paid any attention to anything. And I was toward the
yeah.
end in 2003, toward the end of my stay there, I was sitting with a group of expats and hip, you know, Indians in this place in Calcutta. It was that Calcutta where I was? Yeah. Oh, it was a neat place. Yeah. Wow. And uh, journalists and writers and uh, interesting people, sort of an intellectual group. And at one point I said,
Uh-huh.
well, I've been here 3 months and I've never gotten sick. And I've eaten anything anywhere and I've never gotten sick. And in unison, like a dozen people went, don't say that. They'd all had that experience, and never gotten
Yeah.
sick
Yeah.
until one
Yeah.
day they get deathly ill. uh, yeah, and Indians are really into cleanliness. They're so into cleanliness, and you get, well, if you get higher class, higher caste Indians, I'll be with one in a market, and they'll say, "Oh, I want to get some of that." Oh no, it's dirty. You know, they
Yeah,
don't,
yeah,
and but even very poor people that are living on the street, I've watched them bathing, where they can bathe their whole body without exposing themselves, taking things on and off, and they
yeah,
won't have that
yeah,
much
yeah.
on. Um, and cleanliness is actually a big thing there. And I, it used to India had a reputation for smelling like shit, human shit, and there being shit everywhere.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't
Yeah.
experience that. I think that's more of a thing
Oh,
back
that's nice.
'60s and '70s. Uh,
Okay, okay.
yeah. Uh, and I remember like in Dharamsala. Say you go a place like Dharamsala or Ramana Ashram, and there will be hordes of beggars around it. Ramana Ashram, you have the sannyasin type, the men who've retired and wearing robes, and now they're just monks, and they carry, they have a sort of a kit they carry for begging and this and that. It's like a role in life, but then
Yeah,
you'll have your regular, more like beggars of some of them, especially around places, like in Dharamsala, where you get a lot of Westerners or Bodh Gaya or something. So in Dharamsala, I would walk by this group of beggars, and I'd give every one of them a rupee. Back in 2003, a rupee was that was pretty good. In 2011, a rupee was going to be it wasn't good enough. But I give everybody a rupee. And I remember walking back one day, and there was a new guy there who stuck out his hand, and the guy next to him knocked his hand down. He's already given. Uh,
wow.
and there was, I've seen a lot of lepers. I've been in groups of, I've eaten with lepers. And leprosy, I mean, it's very treatable. A lot of people, they keep it. They want to keep it because they can beg, get more money begging with it.
Uh,
And there was
yeah.
this one woman, she just had no fingers, you know, and uh, and
Uh,
she was begging. And somebody said, I was with somebody, and they said, "Oh, the poor woman, this and that." And then somebody else said, "Well, actually, she's the mayor of the tent town, oh, down here at the bottom of the hill, and is a
wow.
respected
Wow.
person in her community." The thing about that I noticed, at least somewhat. Now I know poverty is terrible and all that, but there seemed to be culture and a sense of belonging and a sense of knowing who you were in the universe, even among the very
Yeah, yeah,
poor. Whereas in America, there's a sort of disconnected desperation and insanity and
yeah.
pathos and just it's not a old culture. It's sort of destroyed culture, and bringing in all this new stuff and new stuff that once somebody gets hooked on it, they don't want to go back.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, we could keep talking forever because we're both so brilliant and have so many important things to say.
Oh, and we haven't even gotten onto politics, but let's save that for
Oh
our
yeah,
next
I
discussion. I joined the Socialist Party this year, so we've got a
oh
lot
did
lot
you
to talk
really?
about. I
Well,
did. I want to go out fighting.
yeah, right. Well, good luck with that. I sympathize. I sympathize. Yeah, capitalism's evil. Well, capitalism's destroying the world. So, it, forget about politics. I don't think the human race, our civilization, has long to go. Uh, so,
Well, I kind of like the socialist attitude, but it may not have long to go. But don't you want to go out
yeah,
fighting?
right, right. Well, even always do what we can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Take care.
Oh, my dear friend, it's so good to talk to you, David. I love you, old boy.
Yeah. I love you too. And someday we have a guest room, but I've turned it into a studio. But I'm trying to get my younger son Clay to send me $1,500 to build a guest room. I can you can do construction here so fucking cheap, you know.
Oh,
I mean,
great, great.
$1,500 to build a whole guest room, you know, and
Yeah,
that's
amazing.
including having to uh, strengthen the wall from downstairs because it's not strong enough for a second story. So I'd have to build a whole new wall down there, uh, all sorts of stuff. Uh, but anyway, Cardino, nice old guy, rides a bicycle here, 15 kilometers, bringing stuff with him. He said he could do it for, well, he actually said he could do it for closer to 1,100. I figured the whole thing would be about 3,000. If I could
Yeah,
do it when
yeah.
Katrina was in America, then we wouldn't need to rent another place to stay because we got to leave our bedroom while they're and they want it for 3 weeks. But if I get that one, then we'll have a bona fide guest room. But without a guest room, you can stay in nice places near here for between $20 and $50 a night.
Oh, that's terrific. That's
Yeah, I
terrific.
mean a really nice place for 50. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, and we're near the ocean. Uh, uh, okay, well, thanks a lot, Mark. That's great.
Oh, such a pleasure, David.
Okay, well, hey,
Okay.
very good. Take care.
Oh, great, David. Thank you. And we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, you never can tell. Okay, take care. Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Speak to you soon. Bye bye, David.
bye
Thank
bye.
you.
So thank you very much, Mark Lewis, dear old friend. Appreciate your picking up the phone there. And yeah, come visit sometime. So, time to run along. So, this has been a Cuke audio podcast. I'm DC Puba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sonora with Doga Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.